Chant the name of the Lord.
Chant the name of the Lord and his glory unceasingly, that the mirror of the heart may be wiped clean, and quench that mighty forest fire, worldly lust, raging furiously within. O name, stream down in moonlight on the Lord's heart, open its cup to knowledge of thyself. O self, drown deep in the waves of his bliss, chanting his name continually, tasting his nectar at every step, bathing in his name, that bath for weary souls. Various are thy names, O Lord, in each and every name thy power resides. No times are set, no rites are needful, for chanting of thy name, so vast is thy mercy. How huge then is my wretchedness, who find in this empty life and heart no devotion to thy name. O my mind, be humbler than the blade of grass, be patient and forbearing like the tree. Take no honor to thyself, give honor to all. Chant unceasingly the name of the Lord. O Lord and soul of the universe, mine is no prayer for wealth or retinue, the playthings of lust or the toys of fame. As many times as I may be reborn, grant me, O Lord, a steadfast love for thee. A drowning man in this world's fearful ocean is thy servant, O sweet one. In thy mercy consider him as dust beneath thy feet. Ah, how I long for the day when an instant's separation from thee, O Govinda, will be as 1,000 years, when my heart burns away with its desire, and the world without thee is a heartless void. Prostrate at thy feet, let me be, in unwavering devotion, neither imploring the embrace of thine arms, nor bewailing the withdrawal of thy presence, though it tears my soul asunder. O thou, who stillest the hearts of thy devotees, do with me what thou wilt, for thou art my heart's beloved, thou and thou alone. Om Madhuvatarithayate Madhuksharanti Sindhavaha Madhuirnasantoshadhihi Madhunaktamutoshasi Madhumatparthivagum Rajaha Madhudyorastu Nafpita Madhumano Vanaspatir Madhumagum Astu Suryaha Madhvirgavo Bhavantu Naha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the winds bring us happiness. May the rivers carry happiness to us. May the earth give us happiness. May night and day yield happiness. May the dust of the earth bring us happiness. May the heavens give us happiness. May the sun pour down happiness. May the cows yield us happiness. He whom I enclose with my name is weeping in this dungeon. I am ever busy building this wall all around, and as this wall goes up, up into the sky, day by day, I lose sight of my true being in its darkness and in the dark shadow. Rabindranath Tagore. He whom I enclose with my name is weeping in this dungeon. I am ever busy building this wall all around, and as this wall goes up into the sky day by day, I lose sight of my true being in its dark shadow. Every one of us is shadowed by an illusory person. Every one of us is shadowed by an illusory person, a false self. This is the man that I want myself to be, but who cannot exist because God doesn't know anything about him. My false and private self is the one who wants to exist outside the reach of God's will and God's love, outside of reality and outside of life. And such a life cannot help but be an illusion. The secret of my identity is hidden in the love and mercy of God. Therefore, I cannot hope to find myself anywhere except in Him. Therefore, there is only one problem on which all my existence, my peace, and my happiness depend: to discover myself in discovering God. If I find Him, I will find myself. And if I find my true self, my true being, I will find Him. Thomas Merton. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us from home. It's always a pleasure to be with you and to share stuff that we are very passionate about. We believe our true self is really just another way of saying our spiritual being, our spiritual self. Because we are not human beings having a spiritual experience, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. Today, I will talk about someone I think you know very well. So please don't take it personally. In fact, if we realize the truth about that troublemaker, we are going to want to give it a lesson. Because when there is no ego, there is really no problem. So this is the topic for today. No ego, no problem. How is that? First, we need to find out who this ego is. How does it manifest? What are the consequences of letting it taking over our lives? What can we do about it? Would it be possible to live without our ego? It is said that an ego trip, it's a journey to nowhere. Let us then, by reformulating our ego and giving it the right identification and direction, get somewhere. Life becomes smooth and the path of bliss and the path of bliss opens up when we unravel the puzzle of ego. What is this ego? Or also called in Sanskrit Ahamkara. Swami Dhyanayogananda, Sanskrit scholar, one of our Swamis from our order, who was the head of our St. Louis Center, he said, the immutable consciousness that the witness self is being reflected in the mind, the immutable consciousness that the witness self is being reflected in the mind and apparently limited by it, appears as the ego, the empirical self, which functions as the percipient, the one who perceives. I am is the reality. I am this or I am that is ego. I am is the reality. I am this or I am that is ego. The jiva or individual being expressing itself as I is called the ego or Ahamkara. Jiva is that being which identifies its existence with that of life in the physical body. The ego can be taken as that part of the mind which expresses individually. It is the ego that gives us the sense of I and mine. I and mine. The ego is the center of our personality, which is a very, very complex thing. It is not easy to understand how deep its roots are. Every moment of our lives, we are keenly conscious of ourselves as individuals. This is not true. Every moment of our lives, we can't avoid but being conscious of our individuality. When we think or speak or do anything, we know that the ego, our I sense, is present right now. When we think, speak, or do anything, we know that the ego, our I sense, is present. There cannot be any activity, mental or physical, any understanding. There cannot be any feeling or desire without the sense of individuality in the background. As simple as that. The ego functions, it associates with a wide variety of objects. We color ourselves with different colors. The ego has to identify with something, or else it cannot express itself. Very subtle. The ego has to identify itself first with the body. Therefore you say, I'm tall, I am this, I look like that. I am that. The ego has to identify itself, secondly, with the mind. I say, I am thinking, I am angry. The emotion of anger is an object of association. The ego in action changes from moment to moment, depending on the color we take. This moment, it is linked with a certain function of the body, and the next moment with the state of the mind, or an external circumstance. You guys following me? So, looks like and sounds like very natural to me. So, what's the problem? Is there any problem with that? Well, I think there is a huge problem. According to Vedanta, our true nature is divine. Our true nature, who we truly, truly are, is of the nature of God. Sri Ramakrishna says, the sun can give heat and light to the whole world, but he cannot do so when the clouds shine out his rays. Similarly, as long as egotism veils the heart, like the clouds obstructing the sun rays, similarly, as long as egotism veils the heart of a human being, God cannot shine upon it. The problem is that in our lives, instead of having a God-centered activity, we practice a me, I and me centered activity. Human beings are naturally selfish, naturally egotistic. We just mentioned the process of identification with the body and mind. Human beings are naturally selfish and egotistic. According to Vedanta, every human being, except of course the liberated souls or enlightened beings, are naturally selfish. In our scriptures, they say, well, except as I said, the liberated souls, all human beings have selfishness as their instinctive characteristic. It's so natural, you just forgot about it. It's with you all the time. Selfishness is the most natural trait of a human being, and is the cause, and is caused by what we call self-ignorance. Selfishness is very natural in all of us, a natural trait of a human being, and the root cause is self-ignorance. What do you mean, Swami, that I don't know who I am? No? As long as we are spiritually ignorant, selfishness is natural, and no one can avoid that. Just as feeling hungry is natural, just as feeling thirsty is natural and instinctive, selfishness is also instinctive and universal for all human beings. According to our scriptures, this selfishness, and this is very important, is expressed in three ways. Number one, our notion or our idea that I am an individual with body and mind. Selfishness expresses first in what we call the Ahamkara notion. The Ahamkara, the notion or idea that I am an individual with body and mind, sense complex. Ahamkara is a misconception or notion or idea that I am a human being with a body, mind, sense complex. You're going to feel that all the time. This is a universal expression of selfishness. The second expression of selfishness, that is a natural result of the first. The Ahamkara, the ego, in an individual is connected to a few things being around. that Ahamkara is connected with my house, my phone, my car, my property. We also say my wife, my son, my daughter, my grandkids, etc. These connections are called or represented what we in Sanskrit say Mamakara, mine. This is mine, and it's for me. Mamakara, therefore, is an expression of that identity, Ahamkara. Now, I divide the world into two groups. The group that I like, which is favorable to me from the standpoint of who I consider myself that I am, and with my sense of Mamakara. I make a list of things that I like. I make a list of people that I love to be around with, because that gives me happiness. It makes me feel good. Natural, yes indeed. This also gives me a high dose of what we call raga or attachment. We naturally, through Ahamkara and Mamakara, we get trapped. We get attached to the things we like. The other group, I make sure, is of the things and the people that I dislike, and I don't want to be around them. Because that's a source of sorrow. I develop hatred and dislike towards these things or people. That is called dvesha in Sanskrit. Raga and dvesha, likes and dislikes, attachment and aversion, are the twin brothers of this Ahamkara and Mamakara. Is it clear? Very good. According to our scriptures, and it's all over the entire Gita, every living being and every human being is bound by Ahamkara, Mamakara, Raga, and Dvesha. We, as a result, human beings are naturally selfish. We human beings are naturally self-centered. We human beings are naturally egotistic. You may say, well, what's the problem with that? I'm selfish, self-centered, egotistic. Yes, and so what? Well, there is a problem that comes with it. As long as our life is governed, is ruled by Ahamkara, that I am the body, I am the mind, Mamakara, that is mine and for me, and Raga and Dvesha, that I like you or I dislike you, our life is unfortunately miserable. Ahamkara and Mamakara can be termed as a problem because they lead to attachment, a psychological dependence on the external world. In chapter number 2 of the Bhagavad Gita, verses number 62 and 63, we read, Dhyayanto vishayam pumsaha sangaste shrupajayate sangat sanchayate kama kama krodho vijayate krodhat bhavati sammoha sammohat smridvi brahmaha smriti bramshat buddhinasho buddhinashat pranashyati smriti bramshat buddhinasho buddhinashat pranashyati. In the case of a person who dwells on objects, who identifies himself with the objects, external objects, there arises attachment. From attachment grows hankering, desire. From hankering springs anger. From anger follows delusion. From delusion, failure of memory. From failure of memory, the loss of understanding. From the loss of understanding, he or she perishes. Thinking about sense objects will attach you to sense objects. Grow attached and you become addicted. Frustrate your addiction, it turns to anger. Be angry and you confuse your mind. Confuse your mind, you forget the lesson of experience. Forget experience, you lose discrimination, discernment, and you miss life's only purpose. As long as you have these likes and dislikes, this raga and dvesha, that I really want the entire world and the people around me to conform to what I like or I dislike, I have a problem. Do you see it? Nisargadatta Maharaj says, it is the I am the body idea that is calamitous. It blinds you completely to your real nature. Even for a moment, do not think that you are the body. Even for a moment, he says. What is the problem? The problem, my dears, is selfishness. Self-centered activity, lower self. Selfishness is the problem. For those who have a clear understanding, this is also mentioned in verse number 64 from the Bhagavad Gita, those who go beyond raga and dvesha. For those who have been warned and listened to the good news. What is the good news again? We come to this world with this kind of package, an operating system. We require either an upgrade or maybe just something else, maybe an open source or something. This package is selfishness, consisting of the I and the body, the mind. This is for me, this is mine, and I like and dislike. Selfishness is instinctive and is born out of what we call in Vedanta ajnana, avidya, self-ignorance. Atma ajnana. All problems start with the assumption that my false self, the self that I exist, the self that exists only in my own egocentric desire. All the problems start from the assumption that my false self, the self that exists only in my own egocentric desires, is the fundamental reality of life to which everything else in the universe is ordered. Thus, I use up my life in the desire for pleasure and the thirst for experiences, for power, for honor, knowledge, and love, to clothe this false self and construct its nothingness into something objectively real. And I wind experiences around myself and cover myself with pleasures and glory, like bandages, in order to make myself perceptible to myself and to the world, as if I were an invisible body that could only become visible when something visible covered its surface. When the relative identity of the ego, is taken to be my deepest and only identity, when I am thought to be nothing but the sum total of all my relationships, when I am thought to be nothing but the sum total of all my relationships, when I cling to this self, little self, and make it the center around which and for which I live, then I make myself, then I make my empirical identity into the false self. My own self then becomes the obstacle to realizing my true higher self. This was said by my dear friend Thomas Merton. Isha, Isha. Now, when we doubt our state of being, when we want a second opinion, very naturally in all of us, hey, what do you think? How should I behave in this particular situation? The common thing to say is, just be yourself. Now, do we really know who we truly are? How many times a day do you use the word I? We are all secretly our own favorite subject, aren't we? We love to talk about ourselves, but have you ever thought about who and what you mean when you use the word I? Have you guys ever thought about this? What you mean when you use the word I? You know who you mean when you refer to yourself by saying I. You mean the consciousness that is housed in this physical body belonging to you, belonging to you. You mean a person that is defined by your thoughts, tastes, preferences, and opinions. That's the you to which you are referring, because what other you could there be? We believe that our self simply is, and that it exists in our own minds. But that self identity isn't really, we think the mind is up here, right? Or where we think the mind is. Neuroscience, we're going to get a little more serious now. I'm sorry. Hope you guys don't get bored. But this is very, very interesting. Neuroscience actually confirms this. Scientists have mapped every part of our brain. They have identified our language centers, all this, and our zones for processing, compassion, love, facial recognition, and every other function that makes us a human being. But when you look for that little self-controlled chamber, it simply can't be found, says science. There is no self component in our brain. You must be thinking, that's ridiculous, because this is, in this very moment, I'm listening to you, Swami. and I'm having thoughts, and they are probably something like, I don't believe in that. Maybe, hopefully not. Neuroscience has been able to locate the physical centers for language, compassion, and for many other mental processes, but it still hasn't found the center of our identity, ourself. In 1960s, neuroscientists and psychologists Roger Sperry and Dr. Michael Gazzaniga performed a series of radical experiment surgeries on patients with epilepsy with the aim of treating their seizures. Dr. Perry severed the part of their brains called the corpus callosum. Corpus callosum is a thick bundle of nerves and fibers that connects the right side of your brain to the left side of your brain and allows the two to communicate back and forth. Perry's procedure was a success, and in that it accomplished his original purpose. The severity of the patient's seizures was tremendously reduced, but it also provided an unexpected benefit by virtue of providing scientists with a focused group of people whose right and left brains were no longer in communication. Interesting. As they worked to understand what would happen when communication in the brain was interrupted, researchers found that the studies conducted on split brain patients enabled them to isolate and identify the different functions of each side of the human brain. They also discovered that a clear understanding of the different sides and their functions is crucial for developing an understanding of the self. Now, one key insight their research revealed is that our right and left are sort of mixed up. As you all know, all sensory information from the left side of our body is in fact processed by the right side of our brain, and vice versa. So, what does our left brain side do? Well, it turns out that its primary function is to act as an interpreter, the left side. But what's especially interesting is the fact that its interpretations are often straight out on the left field. Chris Neubauer, the PhD, who wrote a book, who I have to say I was inspired upon. He's the author of No Self, No Problem. Now I call this lecture No Ego, No Problem. That's because he based his research on the Buddhist tradition. There's a slight difference when it comes to Vedantic philosophy or the Vedantic principle of that witness being present all the time. He says, even though the left brain interpreter is always on and cannot be turned off, once we become aware of its constant interpretation, a new awareness of ourselves and the world begins. Once when we become aware of its interpretation, hey, this is my left brain side, reading the signs, you can say. The truth is that your left brain has been interpreting reality for you your whole life, even if it is usually incorrect. So when something happens to you, it interprets it in a way that seems right. Our left brain is an interpreter. Its job is to provide us with a plausible explanation for the things that happen to us. Our left brain use language to make sense of reality. Language is what gives depth and meaning to our world. Is it not? I'm now using language to communicate with you. Gives meaning. It enables us to navigate reality because definite names for objects and concepts make it easier for us to communicate with each other and make sense of the world. Our brains create patterns. Our brain's ability to identify patterns is the reason we are able to make sense of language. We need this understanding of patterns in order to figure out the rules of grammar linguistics and to determine what constitutes a correctly spelled word. For example, without this understanding, we would lack the ability to realize that the letters C-A-T means cat, which we can in turn connect to a fluffy animal. Without the ability to identify patterns, we can't assert that cat is a real word, which means something and not just gibberish. And since our left brain is our interpreter, it's also the side of our brain that's responsible for identifying patterns. The left brain interpreter uses language and categorization as its two primary tools. The left brain is the dominant center for language and includes the inner speech. Listen to this. Includes the inner speech we use when talking to ourselves. Language is simply a description of what reality is. It creates symbols, stories, or words that represent something else. All this combined with your memories create an illusion of the self that everyone identifies with. All this, with these memories, creates an illusion that we all identify ourselves with. As I said, the left brain is also able to create categories. Categories exist because the brain creates differences and opposites of things that have been grouped based on common feature. Categories are mental representations that can be very useful. For categories to exist, though, there has to be judgment to determine what goes into different groups. To interpret is to judge. You can choose to no longer take interpretation seriously, though. That's your choice. This is very important because you've been, until now, naturally and without any kind of okay, let me think over this, in identifying yourself with this body-mind complex and embrace this as to be yourself. The left brain interpreter also creates a collection of categorical thoughts based on the ideas of wrong and right, and mental models of how things are supposed to be. Oh, this goes here, different boxes, we love that. Oh, he's like this. Boom, lock it. But this is very interesting. These mental models of how things are supposed to be, we group them into what? The third characteristic of egotism, or selfishness. We group them into likes and dislikes. That might seem to be all well and good, but what happens when our brains see patterns, even when they are not there? And what happens when that pattern, making a skill, is directed inward, toward that concept of ourselves? One result is that it takes a jumble of likes and dislike memories and perceptions and creates a pattern that determines our construct of the I. Our idea of I is a consequence. It's based on our likes and dislikes. We create our world based on that. We color ourselves and the world based on this categorization, this grouping of I like it, I dislike it, and we shape ourselves. The wall that Rabindranath Tagore spoke at the beginning. Our entire world of thought is based on that very nature, on that very natural thing existing in all of us. Our entire world of thought is based on that very natural thing, so subtle, existing in all of us. That is so natural that defines our personality. I am like this, he is like that. Our likes and dislikes. Now, one thing leads to another, and this is science for you. Supported, of course, or vice versa, by Vedantic principles. Discovered and revealed to our ancient seers of the truth. Now, all these form our belief system. Our belief systems do not exist in the real world. They are just in your left brain. You choose to believe. This is very strong. I hope you get the subtlety. For instance, if you believe your religion is the best, this belief doesn't exist independently in the world, but in your mind. At that particular moment of thinking. You can also say, I'm the best. Many people do that. But it only exists in you and in those who you manage to believe you. Eastern thought believes that we are not our thoughts, that we are not our thoughts and beliefs. Regardless of your efforts, you cannot force a belief into existence. People die and kill for beliefs all the time because they don't realize they are just beliefs. They accept them as a reality. Your brain tells you that certain patterns make you who you are, that you will like this thing, because you like something similar, and supplies thousands of other tiny details to form your understanding of who you are. Is it clear? Identity is merely a pattern of events in time and space. get out of our box here. It's an invitation to let us think. Identity is merely a pattern of events in time and space. Change the pattern, and you will have changed the person. That means you can change yourselves. Nisargadatta Maharaj. Psychology's first formal recognition of the pattern perceiving part of the brain was due to the work of Dr. Hermann Rorschach, who created the famous ink-blood test. Do you know who that is? I've done it. A subject is presented with an ink blob and asked to say what they see in that image. It's like a butterfly. There are many, but one of them I remember is kind of like a butterfly that you have to say, well, what do you see there? You're asked, and well, I see, I don't know, a path towards something. A subject is presented with an ink blot and is asked to say what they see in that image, while identifying patterns is a necessary tool to navigate the world. It is also true that it complicates what is perceived unnecessarily. By seeing patterns that aren't there, the mind creates stories that are not true. And these can lead to unnecessary suffering, anxiety, and depression. And it's just in your reading. While there is nothing wrong with seeking to make sense of the world, certainly we are all doing that, it's important to be aware of how your brain can mislead you. Now, we forget something. We all have the ability to use our right side of the brain instead of the left. We all can tap into our right brain consciousness. So if our left brain helps us to make sense of language and patterns, what does our right brain do? And what would our lives be like if our choices were led by our right brains? These questions can best be answered by taking a look at the life of Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor. Taylor is a neuroanatomist who in 1996 suffered a stroke after a blood vessel burst in her brain left hemisphere. This effectively disabled the entire left side of her brain and meant that for a while she was unable to process language or access the internal monologue that characterized her sense of self. Oof. While that might sound catastrophic, it actually had a few surprising benefits. Because Taylor was a very intelligent person with a highly active inner monologue, the constant chatter produced by her left brain often generated significant anxiety about her past, present, and future, or resulting in overthinking. However, with her left brain disabled, she found her inner voice was silenced, removing all the anxiety she once felt in its place with a sense of peace and connection, with a type of oneness with the universe and confidence about her place in it. Very interesting. Surprisingly, this stroke enabled Taylor to experience an exaggerated dose of the type of peace and concentration others strive, we all strive to attain through meditation. She reported she could no longer perceive boundaries and didn't know the difference between good and bad. Her right brain felt contentment and gratitude. Listen, contentment and gratitude instead. That's awesome. And although this experience drastically improved her life, Taylor knew she needed her left brain as well in order to be successful in her personal life, personal and professional life. So, as she sought a way to regain some use of her left brain and bridge the gap, she found that there must be a type of middle way, a means of existence that avoided relying too heavily on either the left brain or the right brain. And in so doing, she came to the conclusion that if she could find this middle ground, surely everybody could find it too. She also determined that the world would be a better and happier place if more people cultivated the growth of their right brains. She says, everyone is capable of striking a similar balance, and that the world would be a better place if more people fostered their right brain awareness. The right brain takes a more global approach to what it perceives. And rather than dividing things into categories and making judgment, it pays attention to the whole scene and processes the world as a continuum. It sees the big picture, something that we are constantly limiting with our ideas. The left brain is considered the master of reality, and the right brain is portrayed as unconscious. But in truth, the right brain is a form of consciousness that does not rely on words, constant chatting. If reality were an ocean, the left brain would only take it one wave at a time, but the right brain would see the whole sea. It is responsible for the non-verbal types of knowledge, often referred as of what we call intuition. With intuition, knowing happens without explicitly being able to put into words where this knowledge came from. You just know. You just feel it. The right brain is our spatial center. It's tough to talk about right brain consciousness because it exists on a plane that's completely separate from language. Does it ring the bell? An epiphany. How do you put that in words? An experience of God. Your intuition is controlled by your right brain's sense of non-verbal knowing or not unconscious thought. And although neuroscience hasn't yet found a way to explain how intuition works, that doesn't mean that it's not real. Rather, it just means that it doesn't make sense to our language-centered left brain. Our right brains process information on a faster non-verbal plane. But when it tries to relay this information to our left brain, when it tries to relay this information to our left brain, the left brain can't put it into language and thus struggles to accept the information. So, if we could only get our left brain to listen to our intuition, just listen, we might all be a little safer and a little more successful. With the many emotions we experience daily, it is essential to know that there is no such a thing as bad emotion. Instead, when you accept them as they come, they no longer have control over you because you have given up trying to control them. Two emotions that are innate in our being, though: our gratitude and compassion. Two emotions that are innate in our being, our gratitude and compassion. These two emotions can help us live a more fulfilling life. Some studies have shown that feelings of gratitude activate the right side of the brain. How about that? Being grateful has been shown to create many emotional benefits. Specifically, gratitude can make us happier. It helps us develop positive feeling about ourselves and our life. Gratitude reduces symptoms of depression. Depressed individuals are known to be overly self-focused. By practicing gratitude, attention is directed away from one's self and toward others and what they are providing for us. To be grateful increases our reliance. Grateful people are able to see the bigger picture and remember the positive in their lives, and they can recover quickly from stressful experiences. Now listen, connect the sense of being grateful to your right brain. If you start practicing that, you will start connecting with a different and a higher world. Improve also. Gratitude improves our self-esteem. Gratitude makes you aware of the good other people do for you. As a result, you feel loved, cared for, and appreciated. Gratitude improves your physical health, your social life, your personality. Gratitude makes you more humble, kind, and giving. Increase your spirituality. Increases your spirituality. Reduce materialistic thinking. Makes us more optimistic. Instead of always complaining about the things you cannot change, as it leads to anxiety and depression, show gratitude. That's the practice. Just be grateful to the universe. Be grateful to God. And experience magic. When we see ourselves and other people, we show compassion. Your right brain is also responsible for creating links between words and situations and bringing out the creativity in you. It is almost impossible to deny the power and potency of the right brain, which provides life-changing insights, bursts of intuitive genius, and leaps of creative problem solving. When we train ourselves to see the world through a lens of gratitude, we reduce our stress and suffering and give ourselves the gift of a positive worldview. If we could only get our left brain to listen to our intuition, we might all be a little safer and more successful. Life is full of many challenges indeed, many choices. And it is up to us to continually choose the things that will make our experience more satisfying and conducive to our goal. Many people never have a clue that there is a vast reality in the background of our lives. We are all interconnected. Perhaps these people have had no opportunity for introspection, just to stop and think. There is another way of life to pursue, which engages the activities of the right side of the brain in search of enlightenment. The path has been followed by saints, monks, and without any labeling, by many, many human beings who are done with suffering and want a change in their lives. No matter how you choose to play the game of life, the most important thing to know is not to take the things to happen to you too seriously. They will all pass. Yes, my friends, we have two selves. Everybody has got a lower self, we call our ego, and a higher self, capital self, we call in Sanskrit the Atman, Brahman, universal self. Everybody is a mixture of these two, blessed by consciousness. This ego is our lower I. This Atman is our higher I. This ego is our lower self. And Atman is our higher self in Vedantic language. This ego is our lower nature. And Atman is our higher and true nature. But the ego can identify itself with ideas that are vast and infinite. Did you know that? We can choose to redirect our attention and start identifying ourselves with something higher, with our true self. Ideas that are vast and infinite, eternal. I am not this body. I am not this mind. There is occasionally a sort of unrecognized, implicit identification of the ego with the infinite. When we lose ourselves, when we forget ourselves, when we are engaged in something and we are just experiencing bliss. I talked about it in a lecture on the flow of life. We just flow and experience nothing but bliss, forgetting ourselves. The problem is it does not go deeply into our personality. We do not care to discover the true foundations of our personality, although we often use that word. We do not fully know what the mind is. Human beings have deeper levels of existence than the personality and the mind. The implicit identification of the ego with the eternal and infinite points to the basic reality behind the universe. If we could only start identifying this ego, this idea of ourselves, with the infinite, we tap into a higher reality. Vedanta calls it the reality of the self, capital self. The self is the core of the mind and personality. It is also the core of the external world we experience. When we examine deeply enough, we and our universe become one. when we examine deeply enough, we and our universe, we can be one. The self is that unity. We live and move in that unity. And we have to open ourselves to accept that and start experiencing and living in God, through God, and for God. Because we can never escape that. We cannot. The secret of my identity is hidden, Thomas Merton says, and I love it. The secret of my identity is hidden in the love and mercy of God. But whatever is in God is really identical with Him, for His infinite simplicity admits no division and no distinction. Therefore, I cannot hope to find myself anywhere except in Him. Ultimately, the only way that I can be myself is to become identified with Him, in whom is hidden the reason and fulfillment of my existence. Spirituality goes around the question of ultimate human identity. We are one with God. Thank you. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, the outer world is Purna, full of divine consciousness. This inner world is also Purna, full of divine consciousness. From Purna comes Purna, full of divine consciousness. From the fullness of divine consciousness, the world is manifested. Taking Purna from Purna, Purna indeed remains, because divine consciousness is non-dual and infinite. Om, peace, peace, peace be to all. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the topic. But unfortunately, we can't have a Q&A. But again, thank you, and happy Thanksgiving to all of you. We'll meet again. We meet on Mondays at 7:30. Every Monday at 7:30 we have satsanga with the Trabuco brothers. So you are welcome to join us. Just check out our website on our Facebook page, and there is a link that will take you to that meeting. Thank you so much. Jai Ramakrishna. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai.